Hey everybody, Joe here. This is a special episode. We're going to release it without music or anything, so I hope you enjoy it. It features the Teafaerie, who is a real gem in the psychedelic world, long-time contributor to Erowid, and has contributed quite a bit to the psychedelic world. You may not have heard of her, but you definitely need to read her stuff and check out these links in the show notes to see her videos and stuff. I had an amazing time chatting with her. I can't wait to have her on the show again. And there's a lot of wisdom here, so keep that in mind. We covered a lot of territory, and this is not a normal episode for us, right? Like, this is a little, more like spiritual abstracty, but I think there's some truths we can pull. We tried to get into that a little bit, but anyway, I'm rambling too much. So here is the Teafaerie on Psychedelics Today. Welcome back, everybody, to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have somebody I've been really wanting to have on the show for a long time, and I think this is going to be fun. So this is the Teafaerie. Welcome.
Hello.
So you're in Los Angeles, in the Valley, right?
Indeed, in, as they say, the Valley.
The Valley. Perfect. The Valley can be big.
The Valley repeats on a loop. There's a Starbucks, a Jamba Juice, and a porn store, and then that guy with the jacket. It's a loop, but it's a magical place, and I welcome you to it. Where are you, my friend?
So you...
No, where are you, my friend? Where are you located?
Breckenridge, Colorado, hour and a half west of Denver at about 10,000 feet altitude.
Colorado. Central Time?
Lovely. Mountain still, thankfully.
Time travel still. 6:30 where I am.
I have a really hard time with time zones, but I'm getting there.
Time is an illusion. Tea time, triply so.
So this, I'm looking at some notes we have, and I kind of want to talk about mapping the source. It's kind of hard to talk about, but I'm sure you've talked about it. An epic Seussian poem about 5-MeO-DMT. And that's the last thing you really put up. And Erowid's been the place you've been posting most of the time, right?
Yeah, that was the last thing that I posted on Erowid. I have not given up. I have not retreated. I have not quit writing for Erowid. There are reasons, which we may get into, that I have been on hiatus, but that was my last statement for Erowid, and I think it takes about 15 minutes to read it slowly. And it's a poem in iambic pentameter about 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine, 5-MeO-DMT. And I actually did a sequel to it at the Exploring Psychedelics conference the following year, but it was not reprinted anywhere because it was sort of meant to be heard as an audio experience. But yeah, that was the last thing that I wrote on Erowid to my, I don't know if that's shame or discredit, but I mean to bring more stuff out. I'm proud of that one, actually. I'm proud of it.
Can we talk about like what kind of points you were trying to get at briefly, or
in mapping the source?
Right, because there's a lot of controversy around this drug and culture.
I haven't been following. I dropped out of the controversy. I helped build the 5 Hive, which is sort of the DMT nexus for 5-MeO-DMT. And then sort of around the same time that this piece came out, there's so much ego involved in that culture, which naturally that there is, and it's ironic, right? Mm-hmm. Because irony, far more painful.
Look at me killing my ego.
Well, exactly. But do you know about psychedelic, antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria?
Clever. I like that. Yeah.
No, right. So follow me through here. So I feel like these things that almost kill the ego, or they do for a moment, but then don't quite completely stamp it out as well. They shouldn't, because you need your ego for various reasons, are producing the psychedelically resistant strains of ego. And so in a certain sense, the community, people have a sort of ego death experience, and then They preside over the wake in what appears to be a fit of acute egomania. And I understand exactly how that happens. It happened to me. I first came in contact with 5-MeO DMT when it was legal in 1997, when you could order it over the internet, and it was perfectly fine. And it came with this little notice that said, this is only for its pure artistic value as a substance itself and not to be taken, et cetera, but it was, capital L legal. And a good friend of mine, Mark Pesce, actually is early virtual reality pioneer, moved to Australia, and he gave me 1,000-ish hits of this stuff. And he said, here you go. I've just done this for the last time. And I had a great big booming voice come out of the sky and say, don't ever do this again, and give the rest to the Teafaerie. And so here you go. So, at the time, I was on a messianic mission, and I'd never seen anything happen. You want to see what I got in my pocket? Yeah. The Krishna thing about his nanny was like trying to see what you got, a rock in your mouth or something. What do you got? And he opens his mouth. Check out what I got. I got a rocket in my pocket, and I'm so happy to see you. And so I've been fascinated by this thing for a long time, and I am no less subject to, the various pitfalls of it than anybody else is. But I felt like I didn't know what to say in that community with the awareness that I'm, right down in there with you. And so there was actually a sequel to it that I wrote called Carrying the Light. And I don't know if you're able to post links on your podcast.
I can. Yep.
Oh, yay! Because I never wanted to put out a written version of this because it's meant to be heard orally. Because it sort of changes. It starts out the same way because I had them all a captive audience there, right? It was pretty much everybody who's anybody. But 3 years ago, the people you would have heard of if you'd ticked off who's bold enough you would have heard of them freaking giving out 5-MeO DMT. Blow into town, you got charging $400 a pop. And, set them up, knock them down. What a quintessentially American modality. We found ourselves a drive-through enlightenment machine. Step right up, lay right down. All this can be you for the low, low price of all that the market will bear. Because we've done found ourselves a cheat code, right? And
oh, yeah.
I have no problem at all with people making money. I actually don't. Honestly, one of the bits was farmers, doctors, nannies, shrinks, masseuses, priests, and whores is getting paid for sacred work, and it's okay to charge for yours, right? But if you're setting them up and knocking them down, you have 10 people in line, and you're up it's right now, and there's not enough time to process the thing that just happened to you, and you're expected to sit down and shut up while the next person, right? It is entirely possible to get married in the, Elvis place in Vegas or whatever, and that's a thing that you can do. But what I said to these people is look, y'all need to pick a lane. And if what you're going to say is it's just drugs, okay? It's a great brain coaster, get on board. It's a great brain coaster. You're probably too young for Great Space Coaster. But then sure, sell your ticket and take your ride, right? But if you're going to front with this is something like enlightenment, right? This is Brahman, this is the, center of the mortal immaculate mind of God with a capital G, then you're going to have to suck it up and act like you believe it, in which case you got a couple, 3 hours on it for this kid at least, right? If you believe what you were saying, then this isn't something where, you're up and you're out. And so it was pretty good because the first one, like I said, mapping the source, it was a big blowjob to this entire community because it's just waxing super eloquently about what this thing can do. And I got a standing ovation, and I was the last person up, and so they invited me back, and they said, do you want to, come and talk about this again? I said, because you don't know what I'm going to say. and I was like, so I come up here to tell you all off to your faces. And I am a pentameter. And I'm not actually picking on so much of the people there, but the thing is that so many people have this idea that they have access to this thing and they can present as a shaman, and there's girls, and money potentially in it. And so people are showing, nobody's guiding anybody anywhere with this thing. There's not a long-standing tradition of shamanism. I don't care what Dr. Octavio has to say or whatever there is. There's a broken tradition if there is one. If there is a long-standing tradition, it's broken. And so, the best thing that people can do is hold space, create a safe container, and be here for you if you were, when you're going to do this thing. And I've worked a bit with it in Mexico with my Terra Incognita group, which, is this and that. But if I was going to do a retreat of my own, it would work like this. You're there for however many days, and you can call a time slot. So you're like, I'm tomorrow at dawn. And you can say who that is there that you want to witness. And there is no fault and no problem with saying nobody at all, just this one person. You get right up to the mat and you say, actually, can you guys leave? Absolutely, those people can leave. Okay? Because it's really telepathic, too, and you can pick up things from other people. And, I get right to it and I decide, I actually need to go walk on the beach for a couple hours. Why don't you go do that? You want to sit there and meditate as long as you want to. Oh, and then you're ready. And then you want to talk about it until you're done talking about it. And then the next person can go when the next person is ready to go. And otherwise, I feel like it ought to be one-on-one, close-knit pods and nests, couples, people who are there to support each other, and not a bunch of strangers. Because you might see something, if you're not an experienced psychedelic practitioner, oh, what a beautiful exorcism, except for what you're seeing. And innocent little virgin sitting there waiting. Is that going to happen to me? This doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the person who is being exposed, who might not be an exhibitionist. It might not help the people who are waiting in line for this thing. And so, I was saying, look, I don't mind that people are making money doing this, but can we do it with the respect of imagining that it is what you say that you think that it is? I don't know. I've never had these states with a Sanskrit name on the natch. So I can't say, oh, yes, I've had this state on the natch, and I can tell you that it is identical to this thing. But if it's not, then whatever that thing is going to have to stand aside to make way for this. Because if this isn't the center of the target, then I'm prepared to be surprised. Blows way past what I'm talking about within NDMT, which actually slightly terrifies me because it's more NDMT is more specific. But I don't trust in entities. They tricksy as fuck.
There's no real reason to, right? Like,
no.
Why would you?
Why would you? I feel like a tourist with a $20 bill taped to her soul, kept saying, "Come timeshare my nervous system. I'm wide open." I clearly am a noob in this space. And, click on me, look at this. You ever seen, do you remember, I don't know when you started using the internet, but I'm 45 years old. I remember Windows 99, bad porn pop-up land, right? Look at this. And imagine you sent out sort of von Neumann probes, so that anytime they encounter a conscious mind, it just occurs as everything you've ever wanted. It just occurs as the thing itself. You can't even describe it. It's just the thing itself. It's literally everything. And if you say yes to it, it starts downloading right away. Well, it might be an upgrade. Sometimes it is. Are you feeling lucky, bitch? It might be malware. Mostly it isn't. I had this situation in the Amazon. I was like to die. And not because of this, because another complex situation, but after I'd resolved that situation, there was still all of these, it's sort of undefragmented, about computer defragmentation. There's just all these loops still running on your system. What are they? Well, it was stuff that you've sort of picked up out there on the unfiltered internet. And I said, well, what is it doing to me? It doesn't read as a question. What is it doing to me? Mostly nothing. It's using my unused cycles like SETI at home does. It's just it's mining its fucking crypto on me. It just wanted you to click on it because we are holding real estate. We are holding a thing. We are actually processing data. We're a thing that does that. And so here we jolly well are. And I mean, I understand. I have friends of mine who have had incredible upgrades from DMT. And I'm all, I will drive 3 hours to watch you do it. I won't facilitate it. I'm fascinated by it. I wish that I had the courage to do it more often. I feel like the kid who's holding on to the top of the swimming pool and sticking their head under, and sort of grabbing onto the rail and looking around under there and wanting to be sure I could pull myself back up, which that's a cowardly stance. Mm. And I feel that on the other hand, like I don't want to have hubris be the reason that I get infested with more of these sort of random programs. So, I'm endlessly curious.
There's not too many people that talk about it in that way. I know of one guy named Phil Farber who lives like outside Poughkeepsie. You familiar with Phil?
I've heard the name.
He's super smart. He's like a big NLP guy, really deep in the magic world. But he's he talks about all this stuff in terms of like memes, and like memes could be like a software thing.
I mean, I don't think of it as being like literal exactly, but as we've sort of manifested the internet, and it's sort of forced us to develop a language around the concept of information processing generally. And I feel like that vocabulary presents a sort of fertile and flexible and aesthetically satisfying framework to talk about these sorts of ideas. I don't think that psychedelic space is really like World of Warcraft writ large. It's further away from that than we are from punch card machines, but in the sense that it seems to be a system that processes information. I feel like I can stamp that. Mm-hmm. I'm on the way. I'm about to go next week and talk at a conference. The Association for Transpersonal Psychology Conference's 50th anniversary, and I'm on a panel about the simulation hypothesis, or about specifically descendant theory, which is a sort of sub-branch of the simulation hypothesis. And again, sort of the same thing with the 5-MeO thing. They don't know what I'm going to say, which is that I think that the more specific that you get, the more hot water that you're in. I think it's very valid to say, I think that this is a system that processes information. I think that the physics backs that up. Why is there such an argument about what if black holes eat information? Why does it matter if information is conserved? There's a line of thinking about it. It's a system that processes information. It is meaningful and important. If you like your metaphors plausible, which I do, because I'm a nerd, it seems like it's more likely to be a simulation than any of the other ontologies that have been presented to me. In the sense that if it's ever going to be possible to make a believable, like, matrix universe, right, there have to be a lot more of them than there are primary universes, because when our descendants turn on the second game or ancestor simulation or whatever, then there's 2 of them running in one real universe, right? So when our descendants turn on the 5th or the 10th, game or ancestor simulation or what have you, there's 5 or 10 of them running on one real universe. Maybe everybody has their own individual copy of this thing. If we get that far, and this may be the filter, then we're going to make a lot of them for a long time. So if you're in a random experience like this, what are the odds that you're in the bottom? 1 divided by however many simulations that there are running. So if you think that this is the only place where life would have evolved, which seems exceedingly thin to me, if you're going to say hyperinflation and et cetera, you've seen the Hubble Deep Field shot, right?
That's beautiful.
It's beautiful, and it bounced off of people. So, like, when we figured out that the Earth goes around the sun, it was a huge deal. It fucked up the church. And when we figured out that there were a galaxy, it was a huge deal. When people saw the deep field shot in National Geographic, it bounced right off of them. You know how people suppress DMT experiences immediately because they're just like, I don't know what to do with information like that, and they suppress it. So, like, people saw the deep field shot, pictures of billions of galaxies, and I don't know what to do with information like that, and they just suppress it. But we can see 300 billion galaxies from here. Let's lowball it to the lowest possible number and say that there's only one sentient species on each galaxy. Okay, you can see how much we're lowballing it here. That there's only one that is capable of and willing to create a believable simulation. And we could fool a little kid now, like a little kid looking at the window that's like a window of Tokyo and it's a fake window. You could fool that kid now. Okay, we know that everything is data that goes up your brainstem. You're not a little guy looking out of your eyes, like looking out of a hole in your eyes and seeing things out here. You're drawing all of this in inside of your brain, right? So you know that data can draw stuff in. We know that even the most boring, stolid, lumpen person will tell you that you're drawing this in inside of your brain. So if only one sea species in an entire galaxy is capable of and willing to make a believable simulation, we can see 300 billion of them from here. So what is the odds that we're living in the bottom one? 300 billion to 1 is the lowest number that we can come up with. And so, sure, I actually find this incredibly hopeful. I don't think it's necessarily our own descendants. That's just something we could come up with. Sure, our descendants will probably be there. That's a life that we already know about. They could be the squid people from, or better yet, worse yet, more intensely psychedelic yet. They could be the blah, blah, blah from the 12th dimension that for whom 5D is a cartoon. It's just drawing it in such a simple format that time only moves in one direction, right? And it's playing out a game inside of that situation. And, we don't know if it's our own descendants. We don't know anything about it. We certainly don't know what it wants us to do with our willies or whatever. It kind of blows all of these sort of religious ontologies out of the water in that sense. It must be sort of like a patriarch in a, medieval society that, no, we have no idea. But it potentially centralizes us because, if this is a massively multiplayer game, and I like that better, in the sense that, people, is it a school, it's a test, it's a trap, it's a prison, it's none of these things. Those are all metaphors, sort of based on things that occur inside of here. But I prefer massively multiplayer game to any of the alternatives in the sense that, what am I here to do? Most people think it's a school. They're here to learn. I'm here to play my character and participate in a collective work of art. And I do learn things, and when you're about to level, you can feel, the big boss stuff comes back, and then suddenly new powers, new challenges, right? But I wouldn't be here if this thing didn't get 5 stars in universes.com because, we're the freaking customer in that model. We're who this is buying for and about. We're not in somebody's little bug jar. We're playing this game because it's an awesome game.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you familiar with Dr. Andrew Gallimore?
Not by name, maybe.
Tell me what this so he's a computational neurobiologist he's English, but
sounds sexy. Computational neurobiologist. Can I meet you, Doctor?
Wait till you see pictures of him.
Yeah. But, I don't care. I don't care if you're the wrinkliest old Yoda dude. I'm all about it.
So he just wrote this book. It's not released yet, but Alien Information Theory.
Okay. Ooh,
and it's,
I haven't seen my nipples. I'm turned on already.
Right, and then you get into it, and it's like all kind of like old school, like 8-bit design the whole way through. But he does like really a great job arguing for higher dimensional entities and just entities elsewhere.
Context.
DMT.
Happen.
So he's trying to make an argument for DMT entities having some sort of reality relative to our reality. And
we see the same thing, right? I asked the lady I was working with in the Amazon, who was incredible, Borka Kifuk, who I'm going to write, my every essay about this is about to come out, and then my book will come out. But she was the editor of the Medical Journal of Record in Croatia. full on hardcore science person.
Mm.
And then she went and did 7 years of sucking at a combo doing diets. And, she was like, I didn't want to believe this. But was able to speak English, which is incredible to me as a Westerner, sort of just being able to ask questions. Can I ask you questions? And say, I don't have any secrets, if that's what you mean. And can you teach me? The fact is that you got to suck it up and do the diets and have the software uploaded. Oh, right. And I'm like, I can tell you some stuff. I can teach you some songs. It's not nothing. It's a +1 if you go around the Zendo and say, and I do, right? But that's +1. I'm like one level above a villager on this thing, and you got to suck it up and do the diets and have the software uploaded. But I was like, well, did you think these little gnome guys, for instance, do they go hang these little hats up on the hook when they get home? Are they going home to their wives and children? No, I think most of them are like the paperclip guy in Windows. I think that they're like programs. They occur as like, and, we're this little thing that are they, potentially partially sentient or whatever? Yes, because it's inside of a larger sentient machine. And so, there's sub-levels of that thing, but they're not going home to their wives and children. Ayahuasca's there when you're not there. Grandma's there when you're not there. Mm-hmm. Right? That thing is there and it's on for other people. But like these little Nomi guys they're making a rainbow in your mind. They're only there partly relative to your perception of those things. They don't hang those little hats up on hooks somewhere. Right?
Right.
And it's an important distinction to make. Like I had this thing come down that I wrote this essay called Telepathetic, where it's like, if you think you see the same thing as someone else, for God's sake, write it down and then share the pieces of paper. What did you think you just saw? Because as soon as they say it out loud, your memory is suspect, right? And so I said, we didn't talk about anything at night. These guys come down, they wrap this thing up, all business, it's like a generator turned off or the refrigerator or when the sound finally stopped, oh my God, that thing is gone. And in the morning, it's like, so what did the spirit doctors look for you last night? Oh, now I have a crumpled up blue Post-it note that's no good to science that says, glowing blue cephalopod, guys. Oh! And she's like, well, you remind me of myself when I was, well, there's some problems with this, okay? This can't be what these guys look like for themselves if that distinction applies. Anything with two eyes on the front of its face didn't evolve out here in psychedelic multispace. The fact that we both see its avatar is interesting. Right? But they don't need, suckers to catch fish with it?
Mm.
Right? What sort of evolutionary pressures could be acting on these entities that, some of them are subject to your will and some of them you're subject to their will. And that suggests an energetic ecology about which, again, we are utterly ignorant and freaking newbies. And probably small fish in the, pond of who eats who out here. They want a piece of our processor, but are quite aware that we're freaking clueless. And there's a bunch of places in the Amazon where apparently it's like, oh, they put out the cat food every night. Like a bunch of freaking tourists show up every night. I'm wide open and, it's dinner time. And I'm not naming places. I'm just saying, like, you'd be out there with a card that says your grandpa's a 10th generation shaman too, because if you drive a tuk-tuk around Oquitos all week long, you get $10, all day long, and you can buy ayahuasca in Bayland Market for $20. So there's a bunch of people out there being like, oh, sure, my grandpa's blah blah blah, and then they get drunk and fill you up and steal your wallet and et cetera, which is why I said we need a Yelp for, and why I ended up with this freaking dart in my chest, which I have resolved. But
so a friend of mine, I know people are really pressing against that idea of an internet review situation. But a friend
why?
Of mine, but why? I have no idea. I think okay. They just, it's putting Western values on indigenous cultures. I don't know. But
and there's problems with it.
We need to protect ourselves.
There's problems with not doing it.
Yeah. One of my friends put together this site, psychedelicexperience.net, and it's pretty good. This guy's name's Tim Cools. He saw some stuff happen in the Amazon and he wasn't very happy with it. So
that should happen.
He just put this website together and people can now.
Look, my liver cancer's never been back. This lady fended off a swarm of mechanical clowns for me. I thank you. Enough good reviews add up. It's not all for shit reviews.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't exactly understand it. I need to dig in on this story. I'm sure you're way more in on this, and we don't need to talk about it now unless you unless you want to. But the Ethnobotanical Stewardship Council that was like kind of shut down on account of, I think what I was saying before was it's a bunch of Westerners saying what Indigenous folks can do, which is very different from a review site.
Right. No, if you're going to, these are the principles by which you could be legitimized.
Right. Which there's obvious problems
I'm making
with.
a jack off motion with my hand. You can't see it, but.
Right.
These are the principles by which you can be delegitimized. Felt you up, stole my wallet, got drunk, left the space, etc., etc.
Right. Which is a big deal. Like there's some obvious violations that we do need to share. Like there's going to be people getting hurt, and we don't want people getting hurt.
And I'm not judging anybody else's culture. It's the same thing I was saying in the Carrying the Light thing about 5-MeO. Look, there's just some basic things. You can't hit on people for whom you facilitate. Give it, if it's that freaking sparky, give it a few months. You can't, it's just basic best practices, people. And we can hold ourselves to these sorts of standards. I understand that some of this stuff is legitimately organic and it's homegrown and we have a different culture and that's totally fine. And there's things that everybody agrees is out of order. Rapiness, not being present for the person, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that there's a thing that with that kind of review that is basically reasonable. I don't think that saying these are the standards for which you have to practice and otherwise we're going to shut down your practice. That's a different thing, because some people might just have a wild talent and they do things a different way. There might even be one that is so legit that what they do is sexually, and friends through friends and et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to be dubious of that thing because humans.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
But there might be a perfectly legit one and we're not there to shut it down, right? That said, they're not getting our gold star rating because here's the testimony and a couple of people really, 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 really didn't like it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And there's
white people showing up by the boatload. It used to be the old ice cream man that, like, if your kid got sick, you gave him a chicken and you were praying to God. You didn't have to do it yourself. Like, please don't make me do it myself. Hopefully just the shaman will do it. And then they'll be able to, prescribe some cat's claw to my kid and they'll be fine. And then they say, oh, this is really serious and you got to do it yourself. And you're like, oh God, okay, fine. And you do it yourself. And like, these people are showing up, they fools want to do it. And in fact, they're unsatisfied if they don't have vision. So let's put some deter in there or whatever, because we'll tow and whatever, and then they'll have visions. And then, they won't be able to bitch if they didn't have any visions, because a lot of times ayahuasca will work, especially the first few times while it's busy cleaning out the communications room, right? And so people say, I didn't even have any visions. I just felt nauseous. I felt awful. It's like, working me over. And I didn't get anything. I wasn't flying around with rainbows and unicorns. Well, I'm dissatisfied with the shaman. And so, well, you want visions, motherfucker? I got vision for you. We're going to put some light, and I understand why it goes that way. This said, is this the best possible way that, on the other hand, if you want to do it in Topanga, or if you want to do it in some place, every freaking liberal city in the world has ayahuasca freaking ceremonies right now, and some of these guys can't do nothing for you, right? They don't know how to hurt you. This is the other side. They're not rubbing their hands together. They don't know how to stick their demons on you, and they're not taking advantage of you. They can create a nice space and they have access to ayahuasca, and they have a nice little group and it's friendly and the wind blows up in there and they do not know what to do, and they're just they can come and shake the rattle at you and maybe that will help and maybe it totally won't, right? Like, I've been with people who are classically trained that the looky-loos are coming in, they just blow smoke around, it's gone, and it's like, those people are not afraid of smoke. These people are some kind of hackers. Like, the fact that they're using that mapacho like dragging and dropping a folder. They're changing the permissions on the room with that thing, and they know how to do it, right? And so, like, when you have people who are classically trained, you have people who can take advantage of you, but know what they're doing. And when you have people who are not classically trained, well, at least, it's just you and mama, and then whatever's in the neighborhood, which, it's at least it's not at some Maloka where, the energetic ecology is different in the Amazon. It's different here. It's, it's different in different places. So you wouldn't want to do it in a place where there's been a predatory situation built up.
So let's dig in a little bit. So, like,
yeah.
I think you did a really good job there presenting kind of like the Amazonian spiritual view. I hate to call it that, but it's not exactly
sure,
Amazonian.
There's not a monolithic, view,
Right.
but there's definitely
Energetic ecology. I love that term because I think it's appropriate. Listeners will be a little weird that I'm saying that, but
hey, listeners.
So
We're doing our best, I swear.
So say,
Language,
for example,
words, that's all we have to go on.
the Stan Grof model, like pre-breath work, LSD, relatively high dose, and you're in kind of a somewhat clinical setting or on a couch or whatever. Like his results were very, very, very good in terms of like therapy. We're not necessarily talking about spiritual evolution like the ayahuasca path or like a medicine path. But like,
and again, the metaphor has been changing. So originally it was psychomimetic. So it's like,
there was psycholytic,
this will mimic we can study psychosis with this, because maybe this is what it's like to be schizophrenic. And then, there's this, we can sort of look into the archetypes of the unconscious and, the underlying processes. And maybe these are some states with Sanskrit names, and so like there's sort of been an evolution of that. But sure, okay, where would Grof at in the 60s, 70s?
Like 50s, 60s, we'll call it. So like, say we have the Amazonian perspective. We'll just call it that, for instance, just for now. And then we have like this Grof thing where we're doing LSD therapy on a couch in a somewhat material. I hate to call it a material. We'll call it a transpersonal psychology-based framework where it's like, weird stuff might come up, but we're going to be able to handle it.
Sure, yeah.
And maybe just call that the Western method.
Yeah.
So like, how do you see any kind of like, this is where we're getting really abstract and way off script, but do you see any way of handling that other than like, is it more just a vocabulary thing or like a functional movement thing?
I don't know what you mean by functional movement. I mean, part of it's vocabulary. Define functional movement for me. So I work psychedelic emergency. I would say I worked psychedelic emergence with the Y in parentheses. That I worked 26 shows last year. It was like psychedelic emergence at Zendo Project, which only does 6 shows a year now, and RGX, the finest festival medical team in the world, and at flow festivals and events like Bicycle Day. And so security brings them in. They've taken off all their clothes. They're spinning circles on. They ran up on the stage. Medical checks them out. It's not a hardware problem. They shun them over to us, and my job is to get them back up on the surfboard and back out with their friends and out of the tender arms of security, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm not quite sure what model you're talking about. Here's you have a person having an experience.
Well,
it's a sacred work. There's nothing. People say, "I'm so sorry." Like, as far as I'm concerned, this is the most important and interesting thing happening at this festival right now. No, really. Right. And if you don't believe in psychedelic synchronicity and you watch this stuff, it's not just from the inside. Okay. When this person is the knot in is the knot right now, and when their situation resolves, and the music changes and their friends show up and the moon comes out from behind the clouds. Like, it's incredible. And I have seen it over and over and over, stone cold sober, watching it. That's the thing about this kind of work. I'm writing a book about it. You can't see this kind of thing in a laboratory setting because it doesn't occur in that setting. What percentage of psychedelic experiences occur in a laboratory setting? The vast majority of psychedelic experiences occur at this sort of setting, and you see effects that you would never see. And it's incredible. Like, sure enough, here come their friends. And I'll tell them their friends will be along in a minute because their toast just popped, right? And you jolly well know it. Right. Go back.
So, Zen, we could... Unfortunately, you and I could probably talk for a couple days in a row.
We will after this.
So Grof, like, not necessarily having Amazonian training or any kind of like spiritual training with like, using Mapacho to clear a space or, whatever it is, Palo Santo, sage, whatever.
Even like sage, Palo Santo, whatever means this to you.
Right, exactly. Like, not necessarily having those tools, but having some sort of like post-Freudian kind of hybrid Western training that seemed very functional and seemed to work people through extraordinarily spiritual states.
Great job. Apparently, it was really able to get people there a lot of times. Incredible stories.
And I've got to see him work. It was pretty amazing. And I've seen a lot of his students work, and it's always really extraordinary to watch it go. So I'm just trying to like figure out this dynamic between like the people that use traditional tools, say Palo Santo, etc., and people who don't necessarily use that kind of stuff and still have great results. It's like, what is that? Not necessarily expecting you to answer well.
What you have keyed to the intention. Like I said, they're not afraid of smoke, right?
Right.
I asked the lady I was working with, I was like, if I blow smoke around the sanctuary space, will it help? And like I said, she said, yeah, I mean, you're like one level above a villager, but that your intention isn't nothing. So, even if I can just have American spirit and I walk around the Zendo space and I blow in I'm a zero gravity nerd. I don't know from directions, but I blow over here, blow over there. So, not in my, well, look, bitches, this is a protected space. And even just the idea for myself that I have done that, there's a level of confidence that's saying, all right, and I can tell the person, you're in a safe space. This is energetically protected, and they can tell that I mean it when I say it, and that helps them, right? And I would much rather have a master level shaman there, right? But that's not what's always happening in festival culture, but I feel like it's leaning in to the right direction. And the fact is, the lady I was working with said, look, you can come and do diets here. Right? If you want to do this thing, all the Jedi training you've ever wanted, right? My 11-year-old freaking wet dream fantasy suddenly completely coming true. And if you do this, you will appear on a board in which you already have friends and enemies, in which your teachers, your teacher's enemies, students are already your enemies on this thing. And I do not want to play their freaking reindeer games. And she said if she had known about this before she got too deep into it, she might not want to play them either. And so the choice is to be a freaking dilettante, and to figure this out on your own. Or, to submit yourself to a game that you do not want to play. And so to some degree, we're reinventing the wheel.
Absolutely.
And, and knowing, but incorporating what little pieces of usefulness that we can't learn, because some things are broadly applicable. You don't necessarily have to be part of this lineage to know that, it helps to hold somebody and rock them and to, make a resonant sound and get them to make it with you. There's the pranksters, the acid tests, like in the first freaking 10 times they ever had a massive acid experience, they were already figuring out, how do you control a group telepathy vibe? How can we create? They saw that it was happening right away and immediately started to try to work with it right away. And so I think that we have our own Western tradition that is, we're 1,000 years behind or 10,000 years behind or 30,000 years behind, but we're building our own tradition that doesn't revolve around any of that. And it has its own dark ribbons that run through it. Do not be fooled. It's not a better and more pure, better, clean, immaculate tradition, but it's one that, it's our own demons. And so
to throw out a number real quick, I read very recently that a survey of Western therapists, people self-reported 11% that they were in inappropriate sexual relationships with their clients.
And they admitted it? So, like to add 20% to that? Wow.
Exactly. Self-reported.
Wow.
Not necessarily like full on, like it could just be inappropriate boundaries, but that's the number that's public.
I had a Me Too moment with this because a good friend of mine had a friend who was, had been sort of coaxed with this person who she'd had a long time relationship with, and she'd sort of been groomed by this person to like have this therapeutic experience, and you need to come in here with me on this drug, and we can get into your suppressed memories of your childhood sexual abuse, which they had never had any, but now that you say so, I remember this, right? And like she freaking woke up being literally raped without a condom. Somebody was inside of her, like freaking, and they said, oh, this is going to be the worst experience of your life, but it's going to be the breakthrough for you. And this was not the first time that they had done this, right? And so I started telling a couple of people about my friend's experience, and it turns out that this is less, more common than we may best hope. And in fact, quite common. Some people, this is their strategy, is that they'll sort of groom people into this very intimate psychedelic situation. And, then but their own weakness, and then the girl has to save them from their personal weakness. And it is a repeated thing. And it's just one of those things that once you say, oh, me too, it turns out there's a lot of people who have dealt with this motherfucker before. And it's, that's why I said, like, if you facilitate for somebody, I don't care. You have to say, look, I want to do this for you, but like that means that we are like no pono for, this good long 6 months at least. And so like if you want to get my pants more than you want to get on this train, then we need to work that out right now because honestly, I'm attracted to you. But like, frankly, I don't want to be that guy. Right. And it's really hard because it's so intimate. Because it is so intimate. Because if you're a good facilitator, honestly, you share a consciousness with this person. When I was doing it, I mean, like when it was legal, right? Like 5-MeO, I just loved to take a little puff and, you'd feel, I would tell them I was going to and they were fine with it. But like you feel such a spiritual connection to somebody. Oh, I was there when the first time I didn't know, and it's such an intimate experience and you want to share that and just innocently, like not predatorily. I'm the least predatory person that energetically I can imagine. And I could only imagine if someone was rubbing their hands together, it would be so much worse. Oh my God, right? I can understand the lure even from an innocent person's point of view, right? And so you just have to do a hard line. I will, because I'm facilitating this, I'm sorry, I really wish I could. But we cannot do that thing. But this one exception every fucking time, right? Mm-hmm. It has to be a hard line. And anytime you hear a violation of it, it has to be a big deal. And I don't want to be that guy. I'm as a woman, I'm more on the side of you're not politically allowed to say this at this point, that there's a lot of people who will, be accusing people of stuff that's not quite true. And I know vindictive women and whatever, and you're not allowed to say that at all, right? And I get that that's the moment. And I'm really, really, just don't freaking do it. If you're facilitating for people, you cannot do that. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. Say it together, friends. You do not get to do that. It's not gets to be a lure. You have to be so careful with that thing. It's not okay. And, it happens. We can all think of the people. We're not going to name the people. Some of those people have changed. But, running around with one on each arm and et cetera, because it's compelling. Of course it is,
Right. Exactly. Like we're still biological entities trying to deal with this. We're barely not monkeys. We're monkeys with sharp teeth still.
The ape and the angel or whatever. We're trying to run around with a cherry on top, trying to run these flashy new operating systems on ancient hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm this guy, Okay. Well, this is partly why the celibacy. The lady I was working with, and she said, yeah, no, I did 7 years of full-on celibacy. And I was like, why is this? The sex is bad. And she's like, no, it's just, what? Let's not open a door. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go the safe route on this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That fear happens. And I know there's a thing in the ayahuasca culture that's sort of like, don't, you can't take ayahuasca when you're menstruating or whatever. And Norma Pandura, who was the first person I ever drank with, now with the ancestors, awesome, look up her Icarus, she's like, oh no, the male shamans just can't deal with the energy. It's too much. It's fine if you're menstruating. Because I was menstruating when I got there the first time. And she was like, no, bring it. I can take it. It's fine. They're just afraid of it.
What was her name again? Just so I can find
Norma
her.
Panduro. Norma Panduro. Her Icaros are all over the internet. Freaking beautiful. I still listen to them. I listen to them when I'm hurting. I just turn on Norma's. But she was awesome. But she wasn't afraid of that kind of thing. It's not that. But that said, do not mess around. It's just, there's enough people. It's just too much. And there's stories of people jumping in with you, right? So it's like, oh, they'll do, you do 5-MeO and then they'll just, come in behind you. And suddenly you're like in this telepathic situation and you're both in there. And it's like, would you just please register consent first? Say, here's how I roll. I jump in behind you and they might be, yes, please, thank you, do that. Or they're like, no. But if you come around surprised that the other person is high, when you're in there, that's a violation of consent. That's not how we do. The thing with 5-MeO DMT especially is that it's new enough that it is possible to establish a tradition now that has never been established. So we have the ability to establish a tradition that this is how this thing rolls. And so, let's make it roll an awesome way. Since there isn't a deep tradition, let's establish one.
Are you seeing that change a little bit? From what I understand, there's still some quote unquote major players. I know you said you backed off a bit, but they're still purporting it to be an ancient tradition, and groups are now taking that up.
Dr. O or whatever. Like, I don't really know personally. Like I said, you because you see the stuff that gets on Vice magazine or whatever. Let's tase these motherfuckers and drop them down in the river and you're like, stop. No, this is not. How about the nice bed and the place in your temple with the people and not the eating sand? But I haven't been close enough to it to see the thing change. I have definitely seen a change that's like partly because of my speech, which got reposted all over the place, which was like, look, we got a couple hours on it for this kid at least. If you're sincere about this, let's have it be this person until it's done, and thank the universe for that, because I think it's an important. Like, we're not going to knock up a plaque in the place where this thing happened. On this spot in 2019, after a particularly epic tool show, this kid attained, psychedelic theophany. But sincerely, this is the spot where, you would think that 1,000 years later, people are picking pieces of paint off the hotel room wall and, and some of them are fake, but that this would be if it's the real thing or it's not the real thing.
Yeah, people definitely just watch out there. I know it's a really compelling drug to get interested in. People are shiesty in the world, and just get a few recommendations. Do your due diligence in Google. I know, and 5-MeO is not a party drug. Like, please don't do this.
Oh no!
After the tool show,
you don't need to do it in the back of somebody's van when I mean, people are just excited to have the opportunity. Oh, this is the thing, and then there's people who are just like, like the toad versus 5-MeO thing. I am a synthetic person, and I respect both sides of this argument. I have done synthetic 500 times. I've done toad 12 times, so I can't, 100% balance that equation. But
sounds like synthetic's good enough, though.
It do what I want to do. I mean, it is the same. Plus 1 is the same. Plus 2 is the same. Plus 4 is the same, because if you hit the center of the target, it's the center of the target. Plus 3 is real different. Right? And so, like that, when you hit the sort of event horizon of the thing, it has 6 other active, 6 is a number out of my freaking belly button right now, but like it has other active alkaloids in it. And if you want 15-minute ayahuasca, where, that stuff where you drink the solution and it's like radioactive and it just lights up the cancer or whatever. Like, if you want to find the problem in your situation and try to vibrate that thing out, that's probably a better way to go. I'd rather take ayahuasca for that. With 5-MeO, what I'm looking for is just evaporated into light like a windshield defogging, please. I don't want it to focus on my problems that I need to fix. I'm just looking, I don't want it to be about me. I'm just looking for, we've managed to tune into the exact chemical that is that one thing, please. And that is what I would prefer. And it also does not harass an endangered species, right? And there's people who are like, well, but this thing sprung fully formed from the fertile womb of Mother Gaia, and therefore it must be a better drug because it's the cyanides or natural medicines. People, I'd rather take freaking MDMA than Datura again. Just because it comes from nature does not necessarily make it to be a better drug, and we don't need to harass the poor little toads. And I've had other people who are friends of mine who say, oh, no, but for me, the toad, it's this other deeper, and I can't speak to that. But I tell you, if I hit the center of the target, then I am prepared to be surprised after hundreds of times, and I would much prefer the synthetic thing that just does that, please.
I think it's called priming in psychology. Like, you've been primed to have that experience. And, people would argue that, but the data shows that they're pretty much equal. There's not much data, but there is data.
There's clearly a difference because there's other active stuff. And like I said, at plus 3, it's different. There's enough 5-MeO in there that if you hit the center of the target, it's going to be the center of the target. Because they ain't no, which that is whicher than that. But like on the way in and on the way out, you're going to have an event horizon experience that could be vastly different. And I'm not saying what's inferior, superior. I'm saying it's different. And when people say, oh, yeah, I've got 5-MeO and it's actually Bufo, like, fuck you. Tell people, this is from the toad. They might be thrilled. They might be like, oh, yay, good. I just wanted a natural toad. Like, if you say that this is, just tell people what it is because there's a difference.
Right. I know of some people that actually like there's the psychedelic world is riddled with problems and problematic personalities. And there's an individual I know
it's
of
like
that
life only more so. Like psychedelics in general, it's just like life only more so. It's just exactly like
it's just
people.
amplified. And this guy swapped out NN. He was supposed to be giving somebody normal NN DMT and swapped in 5-MeO, and the person didn't know that was going to happen. And then the person proceeded to get berated for hours by the person, like manipulated and stuff. So I'm like, that's...
By the facilitator?
Yes.
So they had an unexpected experience, and then the facilitator got all over them because their experience wasn't right?
No. It wasn't like that. It was just like a manipulation tactic, I think.
Oh, no, stop!
Right.
Seriously, like I would much rather... No. This is not okay. I mean, the first time I tried 5-MeO, I thought it was NN DMT because somebody said, "Oh, people are doing DMT upstairs, and you can get in line for this thing." And I was like, "Okay." I thought it was the Terrence McKenna one, and then 2 hits completely all the way out. I was completely surprised by this, and there was the little elf tykes, and in fact, no, you were the entire universe, etc. But I was, that was a lovely surprise, and I was thrilled. But it was my own ignorance. No one was trying to misrepresent it. I was just didn't know there was another kind, right? It looks the same from the outside. You smoke a little bit of thing out of a meth pipe or whatever, you pass out for 10 minutes, you come back out and say, I can't describe that, right? Oh, it's completely different on the inside. In fact, it's the opposite. Like, NN DMT is out like a rocket, 5's out like a candle. NN DMT is like most impressive content, 5's most impressive contentless. It's the opposite on the inside, but it sure looks the same on the outside.
Right. Exactly. Oh boy. So bad news. We're coming up on an hour.
Oh no!
Which is typically when I wrap. So the
Thank
reason
you for letting me babble on your podcast. Hello, friends, future people.
I really
sorry,
hope we
babbling.
get to do it again. We got linked up from Daniel from TAM Integration, and you're doing an event there pretty soon, right?
On my way to Bicycle Day.
Right. So, April 16th.
Okay, so Bicycle Day is on the 19th, which the 19th. You know what that is, right? It's the day that Albert Hoffman ever first intentionally took LSD, right? He tried it in the 16th and was like, I think it's this stuff that we accidentally got it on our hands. Like, careful Swiss chemist, if you believe the story. And I don't disbelieve it, but it's a crazy story. Got just the right amount of the stuff on himself because less he wouldn't have felt it. More, he would never have done it again. And he's like, I think it was the stuff we just suddenly randomly resynthesized after 5 years that turned out to have not been worth anything. Okay, then we just had this tingle to resynthesize it, and I think it's this. We're going to start with 250 mics because nothing is active at 250 mics, and we'll work our way up till we touch the bottom of the... Turns out 250 mics was good and plenty, and, he tells his lab assistant, I think we've made a tactical error. But it's the war, and there's gas rationing, and we have to ride our bikes across Basel, Switzerland. So he writes up the first trip report about this. And many years ago, it's like 6-7 years ago, there's a Bicycle Day party in San Francisco, which used to be in this club called the 215. Fuck you, 215. And they had, Alex Gray was doing art, and Android was doing, it was great, except for Spango was playing. Except for the fact that there's nothing psychedelic could happen in there because it was standing room only. And Sasha Shogun was still alive. That dates of 3, so it was just before he passed away. And I had a little card table, and I was standing behind. I couldn't even have a chair. It was so tiny. And I was collecting donations for Shoguns. And they, the guys come, you're going to have to move this stuff because, long story short, because you're closing up. The official Bicycle Day party is telling the Teafaerie that she got to take down the Shogun donation table. So the fire department will let you shoehorn 3 more people into the sober clouded club right now. Oh, in fact, Vinny and Guido are about to come and tell you. And I blew the horn over the dance floor, and I said, all right, I'm fully cooperating with you, and we're going to manifest a Bicycle Day parade in San Francisco, which this is now the 6th or 7th. I mean, there's been Bicycle Day parades before in the world, but it's a psychedelic pride parade. Come out, Hippie Hill, 419. We're going to ride bikes around. It's terrific. We're not riding around the city. We wanted to originally go to the CIA brothel and the places that, no. The park is a great place to ride bikes, in fact. And so we're going to do that. And then Actually, the first time I did it, I wrote to Mountain Girl, and I was like, 'cause she used to run Women's Visionary Congress that I was in, and I was like, I think I've made a tactical error. Do you have any advice about writing herd on large scale chaos? Because I 10,000 people had hit the website the first time, and she was like, I just forwarded this to all these people and saying it's happening, happy chaos, and I was so touched actually. But no, this thing is going on, and then I'm going to. Oh, and I told Alex Gray that, like, do you know what the 1015 said to me? And he's never doing it there again. But the current place that it is much the same because they turn on the lights at 2:00 in the morning. It's San Francisco. That's how clubs are. Come to the Bicycle Day Parade. And then I'm going to be at. Tell me where I'm going to be. Do you know? Daniel's thing.
Okay, so I've got it up here. It's at the Key Tea House and Cava Lounge in San Rafael, California, on the 16th at 7 p.m.
16th, come and see me if you can handle my babbling. I swear I will be less frenetic than this.
And you can find tickets at tamintegration.com.
Yes.
And we'll try to have links in the show notes. So, problem with this podcast, I'm going to try to figure out how to solve this problem. But typically they come out on Tuesdays, and that's actually next Tuesday. So.
Okay. Hello, people of the past. Hello, people of the future.
Exactly.
I think there's more people in the future than the past because the long tail. But either way, here we are.
I had to model that briefly, but yes.
Yes. Yes. Good on you.
So, do you can people find most of your material on Airwood? Like, do you have a website or anything?
Yeah, well, okay. So my Airwood column, Tea Time Psychedelic Musings from the Center of the Universe, soon to be updated after many years. But if you want to, I'll send you the link for the sequel to Mapping the Source. Mapping the Source is my 5-MeO DMT poem that's up there. And I'm Flowfaerie, FLOWFAERIE on Instagram. And I'm working on a zero gravity dance project. No, really. We're going to rent the parabolic arc planes, and we're doing a zero gravity dance thing. Look at that for Giant Leap Dance on Instagram, and Giant Leap Dance on Twitter, etc. And
I didn't realize you got on the airplane. I saw all the videos.
Well, okay, I'm not supposed to because it depends on. There's things that are up in the air. It depends on who ends up sponsoring this thing because I am a psychedelic superhero and NASA, etc. But I hopefully will be on it. But I was certainly doing social media for it. There's going to be for the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landings. It's actually going to be in October, but we're renting out the entire Russian jet. We're going to do a awesome zero gravity dance performance, and Giant Leap Dance is where to look for it. And I think that's it. Teafaerie, TEAFAERIE on all the things. Flowfaerie, yep.
Yeah, and we'll have links all over the place so people can just check the show notes out and get all of it. And
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. Do you have any kind of like a mantra you like to share with folks, or like saying keep people
awesome. Seize the awesome. Excelsior was Stanley just passed away, but that means ever higher, which it's one of the super team slogans.
That's sometimes what I shoot for.
Yeah. Well, right. Less more is also more.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Until next
it was
time.
really great.